Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome. My name is Dick Fleming. I'm President and Chief Executive Officer of the Regional Chamber and Growth Association of the RCGA. It's my pleasure to serve as your MC here today, and it's our pleasure to acknowledge our elected officials who have worked mightily on a very important milestone in our region and our state's economic history. I think the magnitude of what we're here to talk about today, as I reflected on it this morning, brings me back, and I look around, the folks behind me and the folks in the media have a common thread of, I think, baseball, at least in this town. I grew up in Baltimore, so I grew up on the former St. Louis Browns and the Orioles, and I happened when I was in high school to be a caddy for their version of Jack Buck, Chuck Thompson, who was a great longtime announcer for the Orioles. And when the Orioles would win a big one, his expression was, "Ain't the beer cold?" I think it applies to what we're here to talk about today, and appropriately enough in Beertown, USA. So it is a real pleasure to have this opportunity to have from our elected officials, from our legislative leaders, an announcement on an issue on which they have labored long and hard in the last session of the legislature right up to the end. Came up very close to resolving what involves a whole host of economic development tools in an economy that we absolutely need those tools to be as competitive as we can. And I'm pleased to say with the products that they have come together to resolve around, everything that was in that piece of legislation from an economic development standpoint that we and our colleagues throughout the state were hoping for and looking for is there. And this is, I think it is not an exaggeration to say, a historic opportunity for our state, for our region, and for our colleagues around the state, for us to be more competitive and drive job growth and job expansion. So we have several individuals who are going to comment on today's event, and I am pleased to turn to the first gentleman, who is one of my bosses. Danny Gludeman is the President and CEO of Wells Fargo Advisors, who practices what he preaches as the Chairman of Economic Development for the RCGA. I think he's brought about 800 jobs here since he moved here from Richmond and located the headquarters of Wells Fargo Advisors here. He's also the chair-elect of our board, and on behalf of the business community, I'd like to call on Danny Gludeman for a few comments.
Thank you, Dick, and thank all of you for being here today. First of all, this is great news, and I want to congratulate and thank our legislative leaders who are behind me working throughout the summer to reach this agreement. For years, the RCGA has supported the MSIRA legislation as crucial to capitalizing on the incredible asset that we have in St. Louis, the incredible biotech assets that we have not only in St. Louis but throughout the state. Our recruiting efforts will also benefit from the proposed incentive package for data centers, which we've supported as well. And then the St. Louis region will now even be more competitive as a result of the ability in the legislation to attract major sporting events. But let me take a few moments to talk about Aerotropolis. One of the 5 key priorities that we established at the Economic Development Group of the RCGA a year ago was, in essence, to restage St. Louis, the greater St. Louis area, as a major international center for commerce and the movement of goods. And a similar concept is really at the heart of the state's recently unveiled strategic plan, is to, especially related to increasing exports of Missouri products. And so what we're talking about specifically today, specifically the Aerotropolis legislation, sets the table for the pursuit of that vision, both at the regional and the state level. Our economic analysis, performed in concert with a well-known firm called Institute St. Ange, which is a leading consulting firm, logistics consulting firm, they project the overall impact of this legislation, fully subscribed, as leading to over $1 billion in new construction and more than 18,000 new construction jobs over the next 8 years or so. Total employment attributable to the ongoing operations of these new facilities would be just under 11,000 jobs, with a combined impact over 15 years of over $17 billion. But remember, the heart of what we've been talking about for a while, what we've been calling, quote, the big idea, simply begins with cargo flights between Shanghai and St. Louis, but it also revolves around re-internationalizing St. Louis as a vigorous, productive cargo facility. It positions the region as China's platform for engaging Central USA, or Central America, and then strengthening Lambert as an entirely new source of revenue. And today, we're much closer to that dream than we've ever been before. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Danny. And this economic engine on which the Aerotropolis component of this legislation is predicated is where we stand here at Lambert International Airport. We're fortunate to have a person who leads this enterprise for the city, a woman who has over 25 years of experience of managing aviation from the private sector. Rhonda Ham-Nyberge is our Director of Aviation. She's a member, along with a number of us in the China Hub Commission. Mike Jones, Dan Meehan are here as well from the Commission. And Rhonda is in the midst of negotiating the air cargo deal with the Chinese. And for comment on that aspect of Aerotropolis, I'd like to call on Rhonda.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming to this great airport. And I think you've heard me say many times that we're one of the greatest assets this region has, and I truly believe that. But for the past several months, we really have been working on a long-term business plan that helps this airport to become more sustainable, more competitive, and in the long run, an even greater asset to the region than it is. And I think the announcement today is the first critical step in helping this airport attain that vision, and we will get there. There is a great, great opportunity, I think, for us to take this and turn it into the airport that it was initially meant to be when it was built, and I think we will get there with all the help and support that we're getting from the legislation. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Rhonda. It's worth noting that one of the models for cargo as part of an economy in Memphis, 1 in every 3 jobs is the result of FedEx's presence there, and that's the kind of magnitude that Rhonda is working on here. Well, to turn it over to the first speaker, who has worked long and hard through the session and since the session concluded to bring closure to outstanding issues from the end of the session on May 13th, it is a pleasure to call on a gentleman who has helped get this bill in place by the city having initiated the idea of Aerotropolis, and is our economic development leader in our city, Mayor Francis Slay. Mayor?
Thanks, Dick, and good afternoon to everyone. First of all, I just want to thank everyone who had any involvement in getting us here today. But this is a really, really important day for the St. Louis region, for St. Louis Lambert International Airport, as well as the city of St. Louis. This compromise brings us a big step towards realizing our ambition of making this airport the international cargo hub that we all know it can and should be. Without Aerotropolis, it is unlikely that flights from China will be sustainable, and almost impossible that Lambert could become the China hub. It is that important. So that's what we're talking about here today. This is an important day for another reason. Our police department has been under state control over 150 years. In the last session, local control got entangled in the debate over economic development. With this agreement done, both Speaker Tilley and Pro Tem Mayor have agreed to support local control in the special session. So that's a big deal as well to other things we're doing in the city of St. Louis. But this was a tough piece of legislation to put together. It took tremendous leadership. The folks in Washington could take a page from our leaders here in Missouri who forged this compromise. This is not a Republican bill. This is not a Democratic bill. This is a Missouri bill. I want to thank the leadership in the House of Representatives, of course, House Speaker Steve Tilley and Representative John Deal in particular. Of course, they had a lot of support from some of their colleagues who are here today. I also want to thank the Senate, Senator Mayer, Senator Eric Schmidt, and our senators from St. Louis, Joe Keaveney and Robert and Wright Jones. This is not a final step, but this is a very important step to making all this happen. So thank you all for your leadership and look forward to getting this done in Jeff City.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'd like at this point to call, as we know, it takes two in the legislature to accomplish a bill, the House and the Senate. And the gentleman who leads the House of Representatives is a great leader on economic development and has given leadership to the issues that we're here to focus on today. I'd like to call on Speaker Steve Tilley. Steve?
Thank you. It's an exciting day here in St. Louis and across this state. We're going to travel the state and talk about this initiative, but thank you all for being here. Dick, thank you for being the host here. I want to give a special thanks to the County Executive Charlie Dooley, my good friend Mayor Slay, and Louis Reed. Thank you guys for being here and being supportive all through the process. I also want to welcome some of our House colleagues that are here. Representative Caleb Jones, who is the House sponsor of Aerotropolis. Caleb, thank you for being here. Representative Marcia Hafner, Representative Sue Allen, Representative Mike Leary, you guys have entrusted me with being your speaker, and I'm certainly honored by that. Also want to give special thanks to three individuals in particular. My right-hand man, Tim Jones, our majority leader, who really put in a lot of time and effort into this process. I want to thank my, my Rules Chair, John Deal, who really spent time, a tremendous amount of time working with the Senate trying to get this done. And certainly last, but definitely not least, my Economic Development Chair, Ann Zare, who has been a leader in economic development. She's going to be in the House quite some time, and you guys will get to know her very, very well. Thanks to my Senate colleagues. I mean, Rob Mayer and I have been talking from probably the day after session ended, trying to get this done. Eric Schmidt, Tom Dempsey, you guys have spent a lot of time as well, and so thank you all for being here. This is an important day for us. I mean, our state has some troubles. We've got budget deficits. We've got 100,000 fewer Missourians that are working today than were working 3 years ago. We've got an unemployment rate that is at or above the national average. We've got some real challenges, but those challenges need leadership, and this is a group of people that I'm proud to stand before that took that leadership seriously. We've agreed to a compromise that will create thousands of jobs, not just in St. Louis, but in Kansas City, in Columbia, all around this state, even in rural Missouri. It's a proposal that we believe will be on the forefront of what you see nationally. And we're thrilled to be here to present it to you. It's also got some significant reforms that protect the taxpayers. And when you look at the reforms and the money that we spent on the incentives, it will save over $1.5 billion over 15 years for the taxpayers. And so this isn't corporate welfare. This is job creation. I'm thrilled to be here today. I'm thrilled to be a part of it. I appreciate my team that helped make this happen, and we're excited to let the Missourians of this state know about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The other half of the partnership in the legislative process, of course, is the Senate, and we've had the opportunity to work with the President Pro Tem Rob Mayer on a variety of issues, including the issues embodied in this economic development legislation. We thank him for his leadership and his colleagues' leadership, and we would like to call on him for his comments. Rob?
Thank you very much, Dick, and thank you, Mayor Slay and Mr. Dooley and Mr. Reed for your leadership here in the city. And I would be amiss if I didn't take the time to recognize the senators here today. I have the Majority Leader, Senator Tom Dempsey, with us today, Senator Eric Schmidt, Senator Robin Wright Jones, and Senator Jane Cunningham. I hope I didn't leave anyone out. And Senator Kevin, Joe Kevin.
You got you.
That's always something you don't want to fail to do, is recognize a senator. So thank them for being here. And as I was telling Dick walking up, I said, you know, this is kind of a usual day for St. Louis. And he said, no, Senator, it's not. And I said, you know, you're not. You're right. I said, you're exactly right. I said, it's warm outside and a little humid, but inside things are going very well. And we're excited to be here, as the speaker spoke about earlier. This is a monumental piece of legislation. I spoke to my caucus early on during the session, and I told them I thought this would be the most important piece of legislation that we could bring forth in this legislative session. So when we didn't get it accomplished, we were disappointed. But there's one thing that I learned from an old Baptist preacher many years ago. He talked about talent, he talked about intelligence, he talked about craftiness and about how all those things can make you successful. But he said one of the keys to success and accomplishment is something called persistence and persevering. And I think that's what this legislative body, both Senate and House, did. They made a commitment to get this job done, and I'm so very proud to be a part not only of the Senate, but this whole legislative body that I call my family. And, you know, when you look at the situation of Missouri, where we have over 250,000 Missourians that are out of work and have been out of work for over a year and a half, we have thousands of more that are underemployed. We recognize that our main objective in this session was to put people back to work. And for Missouri, we have to put people back to work because our budget is reliant on people working and paying taxes and adding to our revenue. So, you know, this is an outstanding piece of legislation for that reason. And also, it's an outstanding piece of legislation because as we look into the future, as Speaker Tilley pointed out, this bill has about over $1.5 billion in cost savings. And if we're going to continue to try to give increased amounts of funding to higher ed and K through 12 education, we've got to spend our dollars wisely, and this is the first step in making that happen. So we're excited about that. You know, another thing, I had the opportunity to speak with the Governor's Chief of Staff this morning, and we talked about arranging a meeting next week to personally share with him the details of our job legislation and ask him to call us into a special session so that we can pass this historic agreement. The issue is much too important to become a partisan issue, and historically, economic development has not been an issue that divides Republicans and Democrats. And so I look forward to working with our governor to make this happen in the coming weeks. Thank you very much for allowing me to be here.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Senator, and I'd like to invite for comments another gentleman with whom this community and communities throughout the state have worked for many years on economic development when he was in the House and now in his leadership position in the Senate, Senator Tom Dempsey. Tom?
I don't think there's anything that I can add that Senator Mayer or Speaker Tilley have already said. I just know that this legislation is about opportunities for growth, investment, and new opportunities for jobs, good-paying jobs for Missourians. And at the time we discussed it during legislation, when the bill passed the Senate, I knew it was and recognized it as groundbreaking legislation to couple tax credit reform with new incentives to do a better job of using existing resources that the state has, and in the end, actually having a net savings to the state budget and provide these new job opportunities. And I simply believed that we just ran out of time on what was a very complicated piece of legislation. And Senator Schmidt, Senator Lager, Representative Deal, and Speaker Tilley continued to work after session to meet with other members of the House and Senate, and until we
got to the point where we are today. And I'm happy that we're taking one significant step forward, and I'll be even happier when we pass this legislation sometime very soon. Thank you.
Tom, amen to that. I was teasing President Pro Tem when he joined us today, saying this is the Ernest and Julio Gallo version of economic development legislation. No economic development legislation before its time, but it is time. We have a great partnership here in the region as well. I acknowledged several of my colleagues on the Hub Commission, and our next presenter leads the county, is a regional leader, has several of his colleagues in addition to Mike with us on the Hub Commission, Denny Coleman, Tim Nowak, Steve Ellman from St. Charles County is out of town today, but he's active as well. But I can recall all the way back to when Senator Bond and Senator McCaskill led our first delegation to Beijing and Shanghai in the spring of 2008. There from the outset, side by side, were our mayor and our county executive making the case of how important an opportunity the big idea is for the economic future of our region. Pleased to call on that county executive for comments, Charlie Dooley.
Thank you, Dick. I'm extremely happy to be here today. This is really and truly a great event. There's no question about it. This is what I call a game changer. It actually is about jobs and opportunity, how we move our community forward. I want to congratulate the House and the Senate for a job well done. I know it was difficult, but not impossible. This is one of the few items in the St. Louis metropolitan area that everybody can agree on that has to happen, has to take place. It's about jobs and moving Missouri forward. But there are some few people I do want to thank personally. First, let me thank my good friend, Senator Eric Smith. This man spoke with passion about Aerotropolis. He believed in it from the day one, and he would not let it go. Thank you, my friend. An outstanding job. And Speaker Tilley, he didn't let it go as well. Thank you, my good friend. Where is he? Raise your hand. You did a great job. And then my other good friend from St. Louis County, John Deal. John, thank you very much. I appreciate you. Thank you. As has been stated earlier, this is not just a St. Louis metropolitan bill, it's a Missouri bill. It's going to help everybody move forward in our state. And we have mentioned a lot of names. I want to mention one other person, Senator Marie Chappelle. Are you here? Raise your hand. Where is she? She's in the back there? She's gone now. Okay, well, I want to make sure everybody get recognized because this is too important as we move forward in the St. Louis area. But again, I want to thank all our great partners. It could not have happened without the great partnership that we had here. And by the way, the Senate Pro Tem, where's Rob Mayer? Thank you, my friend. He's a handsome man as well. But just a wonderful partnership, bipartisan. Folks, when we work together, it does work. Thank you.
As the Speaker said, we have the benefit of terrific leadership in the House and Senate in our two chairs in economic development, in Ann Zaire and Eric Schmidt. And as far as many of us are concerned, the foundation that is being laid by what is in this bill is a foundation on which we can build, because as the Speaker said, we're going to have the benefit of their leadership in economic development for a long time. An aspect of the bill that we have not focused a lot on that I would like to note for those who are Final Four fans is there is a piece of this bill that enables our region to compete for major amateur sporting events. And Doug Albrecht and a number of our colleagues in the Sports Commission have worked with both bodies on this. And Walter Lampkin, I saw earlier, who's been leading that effort for many years. And we think this is another great attribute to this piece of legislation. At this point, I'd like to call on the gentleman who was the only person here who is taller than Rhonda and Charlie, a gentleman who has given this legislation fantastic leadership of all elements of it, but in particular the Aerotropolis legislation, Senator Eric Schmidt. Eric?
Move it up a little bit. I want to say, first of all, thank you to my colleagues, the mayor, the county executive, everybody who's here today who supported this. And when things looked bleak at the end of session that we didn't get it done, nobody quit. And I think that's the Missouri way. As a kid that grew up in Bridgeton, in the shadow of this airport, whose family, many of my family members were bought out for a underutilized runway, this is a proud day. For us to be able to move forward on a piece of legislation this significant is a real milestone, I think, in our state's history, and a marker in time of what St. Louis can be as we re-internationalize this city. I've said it before, 100 years ago, St. Louis was the 4th largest city in the country, and it didn't have anything to do with this great weather we're experiencing today. It had everything to do with our location on the river, as points flowing north, commerce flowing east and west. But as the steamboat industry died, we failed to recognize the emerging mode of commerce, the railroad. And that opportunity passed us by as it went to a sleepy little town in northern Illinois named Chicago, and the rest is history. But what we have in front of us right now, with China at the table, and really inquiries that are coming from other parts of the world, is to capitalize on our regional assets, to use an underutilized airport in a more effective way, the runway that we have, the great highway system that we have. St. Louis is about as far north as you can go without the Mississippi River freezing. That's significant with the Panama Canal widening. That multimodal form of commerce that St. Louis can capitalize on means jobs, means growth, and we need it now. This bill that we worked so hard on not only capitalizes on those opportunities and to bring Final Fours to St. Louis and to Kansas City and other parts of our state, to have Mosira to capitalize on those assets, to have data centers in our state, but also through real reform that we worked very hard on, saves our state over $1.5 billion over 15 years, to have meaningful caps, to have periodic reviews of programs, to let democracy find its way into our review. It's critical. This is our opportunity. I will say this, to have the opportunity where China is looking to move from 15% of their own cargo to 50 and a place to move it to, that means jobs for us. It means new trade routes and new markets for our exports, joint ventures with our farmers, capital, new facilities, businesses we don't have in our state right now. That's what this means. The stakes couldn't be any higher. So this is really, in my view, our opportunity. This is our big poster on the wall. This is our offer sheet to the world to be an international cargo hub, and I can't thank all the people who are standing with me today that are helping us get to that point. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric. And in further articulating the elements of this legislation and why it is such a shot in the arm for our state's economic competitiveness, I'd like to call on Representative Caleb Jones, who has given tremendous leadership to this issue in his committee in the House and continues to be a strong advocate for why it is so important that we move it into law. Caleb?
Thank you for inviting me here. You know, what's really unique about this economic development bill is, you know, while it does help the airport in St. Louis, it's going to affect everyone throughout the state. Folks in my district who are 2 hours away from here are going to be impacted by this bill. And that's one thing that I think we need to realize as a state. If we don't join together and move forward, we're going to fall behind. And I think that's really why I'm very supportive of this bill. So thank you.
Thanks, Caleb. Thank you, Caleb. And as I introduce our anchor man, who has previously been referenced and praised, I want to also thank a member who is not able to be with us here today, but who worked with his colleagues in the Senate and their associates in the House long and hard on elements of this bill, Senator Brad Lager, and we appreciate the effort that he put into this legislation as well. But I'd like to call on for comments John Deal, who, as the Speaker indicated, was the lead negotiator of the issues that were still on the table as the session ended in May, and worked with his colleagues in the Senate to get us here today. John?
Thanks, Dick, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak here today and participate in this. It certainly is I think it's a good moment for the General Assembly and a good moment for the state of Missouri. I think very rarely are there points in time where you can get Republicans and Democrats, House, Senate, administration, all coming together to realize it's time to make a change and it's time to do something bold. It might not work, but it's not going to happen unless you try it. And really what we were able to accomplish over the last couple of months was really taking a comprehensive review of how we do things from a tax credit and economic development standpoint and try to repackage those to Missouri's strengths. It's our location, as Senator Schmidt mentioned, taking advantage of the opportunities that we have for trade as a result of our location. It deals with our wonderful facilities and our wonderful assets in terms of university research, science, and technology by finally getting Mosira over the line. It deals with our facilities both in St. Louis, Kansas City, and Springfield for attracting sports and amateur events, and it deals with Missouri's natural topography of caves in many parts of the state to attract a very lucrative and a very forward-thinking type of business in the term of data centers. So I'm proud to be a part of it. I appreciate the confidence that Speaker Tilley and Representative Jones have given to me, and I know I'll go home tonight not worried about what text I'm getting and that things blew up or there was a problem or this person has this issue, and I'm sure Representative Zare will be glad not to hear from me this morning about tonight about the latest drama that we faced that day. So I'm glad that we were able to get this over the finish line, and this is a good day for the state. Thank you.
Yes, we are. Kevin?
Speaker Tilley, can you talk about the cuts and where the pain is? We talked about the glory and all the things. Tell us more about the benefits.
Sure. Well, the current cap on low-income housing is $130 million. The cap will now be $110 million. The current cap on the historic preservation tax credit, I believe, is $140 million with a small cap exemption. We're moving that down to the total of about $90 million. But we've met with all those groups, and our goal in the House was to create an economic development tool with Aerotropolis and Mosira that create jobs, but don't do it at the expense of other programs that are working. And we believe the low-income housing tax credit works. We believe the historic preservation tax credit works. And so, we're going to lay out the details here in the upcoming hour, I believe, but that's where a lot of the savings come from, as well as the circuit breaker for renters versus those individuals that own. So, we wanted to do something bold, like Representative Dill said. We think we have, and we've done it in a way that not only do we pay for those incentive programs, but over a 15-year period of time, we save $1.5 billion.
Is there any downside at all to losing some of those tax breaks that we're cutting?
Well, I think they work, and I think there might be some potential downside, but when you look at this package, you have to look at it in its totality. I will tell you that if I had every member of the House on here, they could all pick out something they do not like about this package. I think Senator Mayer would argue the same thing, that if he brought all of his senators in here, there would be one, if not multiple, that could find something with the package they didn't like. But that's the art of compromise, and that's why I think, Dick Fleming said something that, the people from D.C. could learn a few things. Listen, I'm not sold on every portion of this package, but I'm 100% supportive of the package in totality.
Mr. Speaker, you said earlier that this wasn't corporate welfare, and I don't know if any of you other gentlemen or ladies want to talk about this. A number of the critics of this plan disagree. They said that the tax incentives, one person joked that it was the Paul McKee Relief Act, that this extra warehouse space is just not needed, and that the whole package of tax incentives for Aerotropolis is nothing but a boondoggle. It shouldn't be spent in the first place. You said it's not corporate welfare. How do you answer those critics who say that's exactly
Well, I think if you look, very rarely do you have a wide group of people universally supporting it. County Executive Charlie Dooley said it. You have the RBC, you have the RCGA, you have the Missouri Chamber of Commerce. We've got Dan Meehan here. I think when all those groups come together and say, this is what we need to create jobs, as a member of the General Assembly, we're going to listen. And but I will tell you, we didn't take their word for it. I think Representative John Deal, Senator Schmidt went through it in detail. I will tell you, a lot of our discussions with Senator Brad Lager and a lot of other senators, including Senator Rob Mayer, was about welfare and does it work or does it not. Listen, this is a good package. We think it will create jobs. We think it has a chance to transform this state, not just St. Louis, but transform the state, and I'm 100% supportive of it. Rob and I have every intentions to sit down and visit with the governor in the upcoming days. I spoke with his chief of staff as well. I believe we're going to try and get there on Monday or Tuesday to lay out what our agreement is and ask for support and ask for him to call us in. We think this should be a bipartisan effort.
Charles, I'd invite either John or Eric to comment on that as well, but from the private sector's perspective and the economic development perspective, something that is, we think, laudatory about the Erythropolis element in this legislation is that it is accountable by requiring the investment and advance the $17 billion that Danny Ludeman referred to happens before the credit gets issued. $360 million to generate $17 billion is a pretty good return. 13,000 jobs is a pretty good return. And the notion that this is limited to any particular developer or developers on its face is not correct. The thing we liked most about this legislation is that it is broadly eligible throughout a 50-mile radius around the site where we're currently located. And the fact is, the legislation envisions letting the market compete, which actually would drive down the cost of the land to be acquired and have most of the incentives going into the facilities and the jobs and the manufacturing we want to have happen. But I'd invite either Eric or John to comment on your question as well.
Yeah, Charles, let me address that too. I think what's unique about this, having spent a couple years in the Missouri Senate with this tax credit debate that's been ongoing, and for us to have the ability to clear the deck, very cognizant when filing the legislation of what works and what can be new here. What's different about this, before somebody spends $25 million on a facility, before they ever receive a credit, they have to have that international cargo flowing through that facility. And then they don't get the entire credit, the reduction of their tax liability right away. They got to prove it in year 1. They got to prove it in year 2. They got to prove it in year 3. They got to prove it in year 4 and 5. And so the accountability built into this, I would put up against any incentive on the books. And I think at the end of the day, if this works, okay, and the negotiations are real right now with the second largest economy in the world, I don't think this region looks anything like what it looks like right now, and there's jobs associated with that. So I would put this credit up with any credit on the books.
John? Yes. Can you confirm the other big issue here? Mayor Slay says that you're going to get his local police control done. Tell us all about that. Is that a done deal?
Well, yeah, I think, I never like to say anything's a done deal in the Senate until they finish the count of the votes and make the declaration. But I don't anticipate any problems with local control in the Senate. We had pretty much worked through most of the issues the last few weeks, and so I have not heard from any of my colleagues, but rest assured I will make contact with them and we'll talk a little bit about local control. But the last 6-7 weeks, a lot of my focus has been on this legislation right here. So I don't anticipate problems, but I certainly will check to make certain that we don't have any going forward.
Senator, how much of your caucus is on board with this, do you think? A couple of senators have been fairly critical of tax credit programs in the past.
So now, what was the initial question?
How much of your caucus is on board?
You know, I think on the tax credit reform, I think we have, we have all of the senators on board for tax credit reform. We believe that the world has changed, obviously, over the last 10 to 15 years, and these programs that have done a lot of good and will continue to do a lot of good need to be changed and revamped and revised, and we need to move in different areas where we think we can get a better return on the state's dollars.
Senator, how many tax credit programs, are there a number of them that are being sunsetted or eliminated in this deal?
Yeah, most of them are. They do have a sunset, and that was one of the key provisions that we, as you all probably know, had quite a bit of discussion about was when do we place the sunsets on low-income housing. And, several of the senators, Senator Ferguson in particular, who has, let me add, along with Senator Schmidt and Senator Lager and Senator Dempsey, done some good work. And he felt like that under the economic conditions that we had just gone through as a state, the challenges with our budget figures being down, that it was only sensible that at some point in history these programs get reviewed. And so we fought hard to get a sunset on most all of the tax credit programs, and the other ones that were developed, we look to have some of them go before the Appropriations Committee for approval.
Are some of them going to be eliminated immediately?
Yeah, there will be some programs eliminated fairly quickly. There's a new community rebuilding community tax credit. I think there is a neighborhood preservation. I think there also is a tax credit dealing with one of our food banks that is going to be eliminated. So there will be some there'll be some reductions and some significant savings over the next 10 to 15 years because of these actions.
Is this announcement today somewhat of a triumph in making the announcement that you're ready to go before Governor Nixon says hurry up and get ready? Because we're hearing that tomorrow he's going to be saying it's time for a special session. Is there any sort of timing there, political timing?
You know, this is a piece of legislation that you know, early on in the session I said this was the first thing I wanted to start the session with after we came out of spring break. I felt like there were 2 or 3 items that we needed to get done early, and so I asked Senator Ferguson and Senator Schmidt to get to work on this piece of legislation, and they worked hard, and we in the Senate felt like we had a very good piece of legislation. Of course, you know, there's always bias and prejudices involved anytime you're dealing with your own pieces of legislation. But we did have communication with the governor, and on the last week he spoke to me and said, listen, if Speaker Tilley and yourself can come to consensus or come to an agreement with both bodies, come to me and I'll consider calling you into a special session. So that's what it's all about, is trying to get this piece of legislation done because it's such an important piece for the future of Missouri.
I know we
session if the governor doesn't agree to specific things? Well, I mean, constitutionally, we have the ability to call ourselves into a special session. I think that our goal is to present our package to the governor and explain why we think it's a good compromise, and hopefully he will join us and call us into a special session. If he chooses not to, then that's something that the President Pro Tem and myself will have to reevaluate. But I think this is an issue that's so important, it needs to be done, and we're committed to getting it done.
Do you have a time frame you'd like to see? Would you like to see a special session before the veto session in September? I mean, like,
well, I think you know, Rob and I had briefly talked about it. I'm not sure if he's talked about it with this caucus or not, and I know I haven't necessarily with mine, but our goal would be to try and work it around veto session. I think it saves the taxpayers money that way. Typically, when you have an issue where you've got 2 bills or pretty complex, it's going to take about 2 weeks to get through the process. You know, if we could make it a week of it to where we would have veto session anyway, you would only be talking about additional weeks. So I think that makes good financial sense for the state, and that's something I would advocate, but I'm willing to work with the governor and the President Pro Tem, whatever they see fit.
Speaker Tilley, in the past you've also supported the local control bills
Sure.
that have been put forward. I'm just wondering how, you know, what your opinion is on
Well, I'm excited.
arm twisting will have to happen this time.
You know what? I think once you explain the issue to people, you don't have to arm twist. I mean, I can remember about 2 years ago when the mayor drove down to Perryville, Missouri to have breakfast with me, and he said, Steve, I've got this issue with local control, and we explained it, and I did some research on my own, and I live in a wonderful community, but we control our own police department. We pay the taxes, we control our own police department, and I think when you sit down and lay it out to members of the House like we did this year, it gets overwhelming support, because if you're not willing to advocate for the state to run your own police department in your own district, how then can you turn around and advocate for them to run the police department in the city of St. Louis? I believe the citizens of St. Louis who pay for the service should have say over what's done. I'm thrilled. I appreciate the President Pro Tem of the Senate for being willing to include this in the call. It's good government. It makes perfect sense, and the citizens of St. Louis deserve it.
We're gonna wrap up the formal part. I know members will be willing to answer individual questions, but as we close it out, on the Eritropoulos part of the legislation, let's remember why we're doing it. Reuters announced last Monday that the Chinese had allocated $232 billion to 3 airlines to expand their operations both in China and in the United States. One of those three, Rhonda is negotiating with right now. They're back tomorrow, in fact, tonight, to continue. So timing is important, and as all of the speakers have said, this is too great of an opportunity for our region and state for us not to be able to respond to it. So we thank the members here who have put this into a critical next step. We look forward to working with them as we go forward. Thank the members of the media for being here today, and we'll continue to follow this very closely. Thank you.
Thank you.